Hi guys, this is Lalana. Thanks for tuning into the Sovereign Path. So today I'm going to answer a question that I have received from several of you about soulmates. And so this basically is, it's around this idea of the divine feminine potentially choosing a soulmate over the twin. The feminine coming into romantic, relationship with a soulmate, and things of that nature. So I'm gonna do my best to hit on this because there are, as with a lot of the videos that I make, there are some nuances when we're talking about this sort of stuff, in regard to where you're at, where your conditioning is, where your wounds are, and all of these sort of things. So when we're talking about a soulmate coming into the feminine's life, this can happen anywhere from sometime after you come out of the dark night, potentially in the ends of the dark night, maybe, but usually after you've been freed yourself of the obsessive thinking, the addictive thoughts, all of that sort of stuff. After that phase is over, and all the way up, honestly, until inner union, this can happen. So there's this idea that if the feminine is in romantic interaction, partnership with a soulmate, then therefore that means that they are choosing this based on ego program, right? So let me just clarify what we're talking about when a soulmate comes into the feminine's life during this ascension process that you have been activated to go on per your twin flame. When the soulmate comes into the feminine's life during this ascension process, it is always because that is in the divine feminist highest alignment and highest good at that time, deemed and orchestrated by the soul, the higher self, that is you, that is that person. So generally speaking, when we're talking about the feminine sort of feeling like, I just want to get out from under this, I don't want to feel this anymore, I want to detach from this, I want to move on, I want to date other people, I just want this to stop, all of those sort of things that we go through in the initial stages of this process. When that's going on, those programmings, those, beliefs, those wishes, wants, desires, escape hatches, running programs, all of those, they're coming from the ego mind's conditioning. They're coming from the wounded aspect of us that is wanting to get out from under this, date someone else, date a soulmate, it'll be easier, just move on, yup. So that's coming from the ego, right? That's coming from the sense of the separated self. That's not coming from something that's soul orchestrated, that's being led by the higher self. So basically what we mean here, or what I mean when I'm talking about this, is that if you're coming into a romantic partnership with someone else based on you wanting to run out from under the twin flame dynamic, basically, trying to run from the ascension process and all of that sort of stuff, that is an ego choice. And generally that will be sabotaged if you are actually experiencing a true twin flame dynamic, because those escape hatches that we will try to use to outrun this process will almost always fail. I did a video on this a couple of weeks ago, when you try to move on and date someone else. So you guys might want to check that out if you haven't watched that video. That will almost always get sabotaged when the feminine is trying to outrun this because they don't want to deal with this. They want to date somebody else, whatever. And it's another gauge on this path that if it's easy for you to just move on and date someone else and let go of the twin, then you're probably not experiencing a twin flame dynamic. Because this path specifically is about ascension, it's about a spiritual awakening. It is being soul-led, soul-guided, soul-orchestrated, and it is no longer going to be the ego mechanisms that are making these sort of, decisions and running your life in regard to, let me just move on and get out from under this. You can't move on and get out from under this because it is your ascension, and it is something that you as a soul decided to undertake before you incarnated into this lifetime. So moving beyond that, when we're talking about having a soulmate just suddenly show up, right, in your life. You weren't looking for it, you weren't wanting to move on, you weren't trying to date other people, it wasn't on your radar, you were just sort of doing your thing, you were working on yourself, figuring out what this path is all about, doing the awakening, the whole thing, and then suddenly somebody just shows up in your life, right, a romantic interest. So when this happens, and a lot of times, honestly, I've never experienced any time with having worked with people for several years that the divine feminine doesn't start to feel like guilty on some level, or wondering where this came from, wondering suddenly like, was I even experiencing a twin flame? Was that person even my twin flame? Because where is this person coming from and what's going on? And I don't understand. And at the same time, during these processes, there can be like, it's almost like a soul pull, like a soul call to this person, to this soulmate, that can make it even more confusing for the feminine, because they can feel like, I don't really want to date anybody else. I'm not really sure why this person is coming in. Again, it'll kind of bring up doubts. But this is coming from the higher self, the soul that is you, orchestrating a soul family member, which is the soulmate, to come into your life to assist you through certain parts of lessons that still need to be learned, of just navigating the path, whatever it might be. It's going to be different for everyone. But this is going to be a situation where it wasn't your ego's choice. It wasn't because you were trying to outrun it. It wasn't because you were trying to move on. It's just going to be suddenly this person shows up out of the blue, and it's going to feel like they feel familiar to me. This person can feel like, you can feel very comfortable with them. They're generally going to be very assistant to you, nurturing in some way. A lot of times when a soulmate comes in, they'll actually be a lot of soulmates will actually be aware that you have a twin flame. Obviously in the higher self, they're aware, but a lot of these types of dynamics, the feminine will be like, hey, I'm experiencing this awakening, or, I'm experiencing this twin flame dynamic, or I'm trying to, navigate this. So a lot of these types of partnerships will be very transparent in that way, very sort of open and honest. They will be sort of this, like an anchoring space where you sort of feel like familial in some way. Even if they're romantic, it can just sort of feel like a place where I can be me with this person. They don't judge me for being on this path. They just accept me for where I am. And the reason that these people come into your life, and this doesn't happen for everybody, it does for some, but not for all. It's just for those of you that continue to ask me. They come into your life because, again, they're there to assist you with some sort of aspect of this path, right? It could be codependency issues that you can have. It can be they're pushing you to be independent and to really like stand on your own 2 feet. It can be, they're helping you to transcend some sort of, abundance or money issue, things like that. But it's going to feel fostering, right? These connections are going to feel fostering. They're going to feel supportive. It's going to feel like this person is just very supportive of me, very supportive of the path, right? It's not going to feel toxic in any way. It's not going to feel karmic in any way. And so just have the awareness that when this happens, it's not coming from ego. It's not coming from the mind. It's not coming from some decision that the feminine made to have this soulmate show up. It's coming from the higher aspect of you, the soul that is you, the higher self that is you, that is saying, we're going to bring this soul family member in to assist you through certain parts of this path. It's going to be different for everybody why that happens. And as I said, for some people, it doesn't happen at all. So just having that awareness that, yes, this happens. It absolutely happens. And it doesn't happen like rarely. It happens fairly often. That being said, generally speaking, these can be, short-lived on some level. It's different for everybody. Some can last several months, some can last, a few years, whatever it might be. But it's not generally going to be a situation where the soulmate is coming in order to have a lifelong partnership, right? That's generally not how these work. It's coming in to assist you on some level for whatever period of time, though time is an illusion, through the ascension path, through something that you need to navigate that potentially you aren't able to do this with the twin for whatever reason. Maybe you've been in separation for a few years, whatever it might be, right? Maybe you're not in separation. Just have the awareness that it's not your mind that needs to understand why this is happening, why this is playing out. Your mind's going to try to figure that out because that's just what it does. But if it's just showing up out of the blue, it's soul orchestrated for your higher good and for your higher alignment. As I said, generally speaking, these will be somewhat short-lived. And that's going to be different for everybody, whatever you consider short-lived to be. But they will almost always fade out over time because they have come in to help you navigate a certain lesson or, go through something or just be a supportive role to you. Sometimes they've just come up to show you, like, this is what a healthy relationship looks like, right? A ton of divine feminines, we have no idea what a healthy relationship looks like. A lot of us have just been like karmic relationship after karmic relationship after karmic relationship, just replaying the same model over and over again. So sometimes you'll have a soulmate come into your world for a period of time just to show you that is, that was a dysfunctional situation, and this is what a healthy romantic partnership at a higher octave operates like, right? So just keep that in mind. It's different for everybody. That being said, there is almost always a point that's going to come that you will start to feel out of resonance, right? You'll start to feel this connection fade. The reason is, as I said, is because the soulmate is coming in for specific reasons and specific lessons to assist you through specific parts of this path. But it's generally not like a lifelong thing, because the twin is still going to be that greatest catalyst for your expansion, right? For your higher consciousness, for your higher awareness, right? That still is going to be that greatest mirror, that perfect mirror, the catalyst that is shifting you into that higher timeline, into your higher consciousness and beyond, right? However that shows up for us is going to be different. But the twin is still, it's almost like you will have this sort of knowing. And again, this isn't ego. None of this video that I'm making has anything to do with ego choices. It's coming from a soul resonance, a soul alignment, and a soul knowing, a soul nudge that the soulmate situation is starting to fade, and I'm not receiving the same sort of push or triggering or expansion or growth that my soul is asking for, that I was receiving through the dynamic with the twin in the physical, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that answers your question. So in this video, I'm not talking about this content. I'm not talking about, having a high vibrational soulmate potentially come in if the twin doesn't show up. That's not what the content of this video is, just to make that clear. This is just saying, like, during your process, it can be somewhat common for this to happen. And so just having that awareness that there is a marked difference between trying to outrun this path and move on and date someone else based on, your ego and the wounds and all of those things, and just sort of wanting to run and date someone else, and potentially that working and potentially not being on the twin flame path if that's the case, and having no intention of outrunning this and no really desire to move on or to date someone else, and then just having the soulmate show up in your life, right? This is deemed by the higher self to assist you through the path and to move you on your way in whatever you happen to need at that point. These are generally somewhat short-lived. It will fade away naturally, lovingly. It's not going to be like some big dramatic fest or anything like that. It's just going to have, you know, a timeline basically on it, or a timetable basically on it, and it's going to have that feeling at some point that the continual growth and expansion of the soul is still that interaction with the physical aspect of the twin, whether that means you're still in separation or not, right? So I need to make that clear as well. So hopefully that answers your questions, guys. I know a lot of you have been asking that. You know, it's pretty like, you know, it's pretty finite there in regard to if this person just showed up out of nowhere and you weren't wanting to date anybody else. And the other thing is that a lot of times when the soulmate will show up, like I said, a lot of feminines will feel like, well, I don't really want to date somebody else, or I feel like I feel guilty if I date somebody else, and this doesn't really, you know, it doesn't really feel right, and all of those sort of things. And at the same time, you'll have like this awareness and this knowing that this person has a role to play in your life on some level, right? That's how you'll know that it's orchestrated, and the difference between you're actually actively trying to date, right? Actively trying to date means you're actively trying to outrun this path, and that will be coming from an ego choice. The other one is coming from a soul orchestrated choice for your highest good and your highest alignment. So hopefully that answers that question, guys. I'm going to continue to answer your questions in these next several videos that I'm going to be releasing. So I'm going down the list, answering your questions. So that's what I have for you guys today. I hope you have an awesome day.